North Carolina's front court went through an injury-riddled season and just couldn't find the same level of production as last season's Final Four run. What happened?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. Joining me today is our guy, Coach Pack Kilby, coming to you from his office. We want to thank you for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or watch of the day. And to those of you everydayers we've been calling you lately who are joining us every day, man, it's good to be back with you today. Why don't you come, if you're not already an everydayer, and join us. Coming up on today's show, we are going to be reviewing the front court, looking at things that went well, things that didn't go well, the personnel, and then kind of at the end of things, how you move forward into next season. So, Pack, as we look at just the personnel, and then we'll get into it, you had 5 guys that you look at as part of the front court, at least in terms of scholarship players. Obviously, Armando Bacot is the linchpin, the key, the central focus of this thing. Pete Nance coming in from Northwestern, Jalen Washignton, the freshman coming in, along with Wilcher, another freshman, and Justin McKoy. And Pack, I know there's a lot that we want to talk about in terms of on-court play, but man, I actually want to start with just one of those things that happen sometimes. I think the injury bug really caused some issues in the front court this year. I mean, you look at it with Armando Bacot, I can't even begin to enumerate all the various maladies he went through last season. And yes, I did say maladies. That's an awesome old school word there. Along with that, you had Pete Nance dealing with back troubles all season long. Wilcher had his broken foot. His season ended. And Jalen Washignton was coming back from those high school knee injuries and surgeries that he had. And, didn't have a true off season to be able to get himself fully into playing shape. And so really the only guy you're looking at that didn't have some kind of serious injuries is Justin McKoy. And he wasn't going to play that much anyway. So, Pack, how big an impact do you think these injuries had?
Well, it definitely had an impact because just kind of like you touched on, the depth wasn't there to begin with. So, and then, the depth that we did have just either lacked the size that was needed or the ability that was needed to play at a high level. I mean, all great kids, all great players, great people, but to be honest with you, it just didn't cut it. And I felt like that was a big reason why our front court just wasn't as successful as what they could have been.
Yeah, I mean, because you look at it like with Bacot in particular, and truthfully, I think Pete Nance with his back, I think Pete Nance would have been a much more efficient and productive player this year without the back injuries. I mean, you look at how Carolina performed some of those games where Armando was either absent or left really early. Over under Pack, Carolina has 3 more wins if Armando Bacot is more fully healthy.
Over.
Yeah, easily, for my opinion.
I agree. Just because, I mean, for one, we know the huge difference that he makes. But then number 2, how many of those games were just so close? That you've got to think with Armando in there, the difference he makes puts us over that hump.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And here's the frustrating thing about that. Probably 2 more victories gets Carolina into the NCAA tournament, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're looking at more than 3, I think that's a whole thing. And I said it, I fully believe. I think people are going to disagree with me on this, and I'd love to hear it if you do. I think we didn't get the true Pete Nance because of that back injury. I know we'll never fully know how much it impacted his ability or not, but I really think we didn't see the true honest Pete Nance that Northwestern had for all those years. And, Pack, you as a coach, I'm curious. Fans, spectators, those watching, I feel like don't have a true appreciation for how difficult it is to play through injuries, to perform still at a high level, or at least a level somewhat close to your usual level of performance. How much of that unseen injury issue is there that goes on?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of a way to relate it to people so that they can better understand. But, you got to look at just what high level and honestly high caliber players these guys are. And anytime you're taking an injury and taking it and putting it into the fold, I mean, you got to really look. Going against these guys as good as they are at 90%, that's tough. That's really tough because these, it's not like we're just lining up playing, just any old body, every Tuesday and Friday and Saturday night. It's tough competition. And when you go into it with an injury, you're already behind the 8 ball. And, just to touch on your Pete Nance thing a little bit, just want to add a little input to that. When we got Pete Nance, I think the big thing was we liked the fact that he could play the 4, but he could also play the 5. What we kind of overlooked in all this, I think, was I think he was set back, yes, because of his injuries. I don't disagree with you. But I also don't think we put him in a great spot offensively either. Just because the system that we run versus what he came from at Northwestern, those are night and day. And I think that was another reason for his struggle. And then, you start losing confidence, which we saw. He went through that 3-point slump that I think that he had missed like 17 in a row at one point. Now, I'm not for sure on that, but I think that's what it was. And so he kind of went through that slump. He lost his confidence, wasn't in a good system, plus battling an injury. Just
Not a good combination. Yeah. Death by 1,000 cuts at that point.
Yeah.
And I want to come back to that. Let me say one other quick thing, which you talked about just with the depth and the lack of skill. Like, God bless Will Shaver, great young man, just wasn't going to have the skill to be a contributor, maybe even for another couple years at North Carolina, and maybe not even then. And Justin McKoy, like, it got to the point where he was getting abused enough defensively that Coach Davis was just never able to put him back out there because he couldn't hang. And so at that point, literally all you've got is options that you can legitimately play and hang in a game is Armando Bacot, Pete Nance, and Jalen Washignton, who's still getting up to speed at the college level. And I don't mean that from a head standpoint. I mean that like from a physical getting up to speed standpoint, or small ball, and having like Leaky or Puff or Dontrez or somebody at the 4, which I think would have been a viable option. I would have loved to seen Carolina go with last year, but in terms of like a legit stretch for like what you're saying, very limited options. Now, I do want to talk more about what you just said about Pete having to kind of bridge this gap between the 4 and the 5, but I want to have a bigger conversation about that because I think it's a very important point that you bring up there, Pack. And so what I want to do is have that discussion. But before we get there, let me tell you all that today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays, folks, they're back. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. Check out all the action going on tonight in Major League Baseball. Some great games happening. Don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, Pac, let's get back to this conversation that you just breached, because I think it's a real important thing. Here's where I'm at on it, and then I'd love to hear your response to this. I really appreciate Pete Nance's willingness to come in and be a 4, because he recognized if I'm going to survive at the NBA level, it's probably going to be as a 4, and that's what I've got to do. The problem is that he's so much more capably suited to be a 5. He wasn't going to be the starting 5 for North Carolina because Armando Bacot. And so what I think the issue is that there was no true backup to Armando because That was Pete Nance. Pete Nance was the backup for Mondo as a true 5, but he couldn't do that because he's at the 4, and you can't just keep him on the floor the whole game. When Mondo goes out, sure, some you're going to slide him over to the 5, but he can't just bounce back and forth between the 4 and 5. He needs a breather. He needs to get out of the game. And so for me, what Carolina really needed was a true stretch 4, which would have allowed Pete Nance to be the backup 5. The problem is, I don't think he would have come to Carolina if he was being sold on, hey, come be Armando Bacot's backup. And I think that's just this whole weird conundrum of trying to fit teams together in this day and age. Pac, I mean, am I reading the room right on that?
No, you for sure are. And I mean, it's not just been this year. It was in year 1 of the Hubert Davis era too. Look back at the national championship game against Kansas. We need 1 rebound. Armando's out. Brady's having to play the 5. If Pete Nance
can't go with David McCormick, right? Like,
yeah. And I mean, if you look at it and say, okay, now let's put Pete Nance on that team. Armando goes out. Here comes Pete Nance. Brady stays at the 4. Boom. That's the scenario you're talking about right there.
You've got a different national champion in 2022 if that's the case.
100%. Yeah, 100%. So you're right. It is a conundrum. It's tough to do. Kids don't want to commit to be a backup. They want to go somewhere where they can play. But we've got to find a solution around that. And sometimes the answer is – what I'm going to say sounds simple. It's tougher than what you think, but it may just be developing what you got, and is Will Shaver, is he going to cut it? I don't know. We really never did get a chance to see him.
And he's gone. Yeah, exactly.
And now he's gone.
Never know. Yeah.
But maybe, if we can find someone similar, because like what you said, it's going to be tough to get somebody that's just proven to come in and play a backup role. But if we can find someone that fits a similar mold that can just be a back to the basket 5, they can rebound well, they can defend and spell our Armando, 8 to 10 minutes a game, then we need to figure out a way to do that, because that is absolutely instrumental for us, especially with the fact that Bacot needs a break for one, but also can find himself in foul trouble pretty frequently too.
Yeah. And I think he did better with foul trouble last year, but there's just times I think his lack of mobility at times this past year hurt him on that in a big way. Paco, something else I've been thinking a lot about was part of why North Carolina did so well in the Final Four run is because at least the starting front court of Bacot and Manek was performing at such a high level. And this year's starting front court just didn't do it. Let me give you the numbers to compare and contrast those, and then let's just drop some opinions on why the changes this year. So back to 2021-22. Here's Armando Bacot's numbers. Played 39 of 39 games, shot 56.9% from the field, 67% from the free throw line, scored 635 points at 16.3 a game, had 511 rebounds, 13.1 a game, 59 assists, 77 turnovers, 33 steals, 65 blocks. Armando Bacot this year played 32 of 33 games. Doesn't feel like he did that many, but wow, good, because with the in and out. But 55.4% field goal percentage. That's down about a point and a half. 66.5% free throw percentage, down just half a percentage point. 15.9 points per game. That's just slightly shy of the year before. 10.4 rebounds per game. That's down from 13.1 the year before. 44 assists, 71 turnovers, 19 steals, and 33 blocks. Now, I know those aren't averages, and so you can't necessarily compare it because Carolina played 6 fewer games, but his turnover numbers were almost the exact same, even though playing fewer games. His blocks were cut in half this year. Did really well with steals, and assists were essentially about 60% of what he had the year before. And then when we look at Pete Nance versus Brady Manek 49.3% on field goals. Nance was 42.2%. So that's 7 percentage points down from the field. Manek 40.3% from 3, Nance 32%. So that's 8% down. And oh, by the way, Manek almost made as many three-pointers as Nance took. Brady hit 98. Pete Nance only took 100. So, wow. And then you look at the free throw line. That's where Nance outshone. He had 81.6%, while Brady was 69.7. But Brady Manek, 15.1 points a game. Pete Nance, 10 points a game. That's 5 points per game fewer. Rebounds, essentially the same, 6.1 for Brady, 6.0 for Pete Nance. And then when you look at assists, turnover, steals, and blocks, that's all essentially the same as well for both guys. And so what numbers out of all of that really stand out to you, Pack?
Field goal percentage and 3-point field goal percentage.
There it is. Absolutely. Why so?
I'll tell you what else stands out to me is rebounding. I figured Pete would have been a better rebounder, but Brady is just, he's kind of like just gritty and hard. He plays with heart, so that really doesn't surprise me that much. But just looking at them, based on the eye test, you would think Pete Nance is a better rebounder.
Yeah, but like the Brady number doesn't surprise you, 6.1 rebounds per game. But yes, the fact that Nance wasn't more like 7, 8, 9 is shocking.
Yeah, agreed. But the field goal percentage and 3-point field goal percentage, those stand out to me. And I think it has a lot to do with the Armando number comparison that you just shared. Just because Brady, here's the thing about Brady. Brady can hit a three very efficiently. But what makes Brady special is Brady can hit a three with a hand in his face.
And quickly.
And that he just spaces the defense so much, and it frees up Armando Bacot to do his thing. And so, essentially when you look at Carolina this year, you go, Leaky, they help off of. Pete Nance, they help off of. So there's two guys packing the paint versus last year. Yeah, they could help off a Leaky, but you couldn't help off anybody else. That's right. That's it. So that makes a huge difference as far as offensive efficiency. So, when you're looking at those things, that's what sticks out to me is that Brady was able to stretch the floor the way he was. But, you mentioned it, and it kind of disappoints me that we evaluated the talent this way, but Pete Nance was never going to stretch the floor that way. Yes, he was 43% from 3-point range in his final year at Northwestern. Once again, back to the point you already made, it was a low clip. It wasn't, he didn't shoot that, that volume that Brady shot. So he was never going to be that player. And I think the hope was that he could spell Bacot at the 5 some. But like you mentioned, he was never really able to consistently because he was being asked to play the 4.
Yeah.
And the 4 in Hubert Davis's system is on the perimeter a lot. And so we were putting him in a tough spot. And so, I'm not knocking Pete Nance. I'm taking this back. He's in a tough spot right there. So the field goal percentages and stuff, that's what stands out to me.
Yeah. Yep. I'm right with you. And it really, the 3-point thing is boggling to me. Mm-hmm. Brady, 8 percentage points higher while taking 100, he took more than double the 3-pointers that Pete Nance took. Brady attempted 243. Pete attempted 100. Brady made 98. Pete made 32. And again, 8 percentage points higher on connecting on those. That there it is. That to me, if I had to pick one thing that was the thorn in Carolina's side this year, that stat alone is what it is coming out of the 4 position. And so, Pack, the conversation then becomes, I know this is about looking back, but the conversation is, we got to fix it. How do we do that going forward? And so I want to have that conversation as we wrap up today's show. All right, folks. So we've looked back at the front court from this year. Obviously, Armando Bacot, numbers a little bit down across the board, but it's pretty similar to that national championship game run of 21-22. But the question is, if we want to have Armando Bacot operating at his optimum capability, hopefully, we can't impact and help injuries, right? That's just going to be, he's either going to be healthy or he's not, and we got to put up with that. But how does Carolina create the same space that they had 2 years ago to allow him to be the most effective version of himself? And overall, what has to happen next year for Carolina's front court to be more productive? And the hard part is we ask this question not yet knowing who all that even is. And so I think, Pack, at this point, it's still a conversation of, so who are you looking for? Or what type of skill set, more importantly, are you looking for? And I want to start there. What has to happen, or who has to come for Carolina's front court to be more productive in 23-24?
Well, a couple things. I think a simple solution would be if Bacot committed to Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep it real. I don't think that's likely. Obviously, it's a possibility. I just don't think it's likely. But if he comes, that's a pretty quick, simple solution.
Nope.
But, the reality is Zayden High, Jalen Withers, Jalen Washignton are going to be in a North Carolina uniform next year. And so let's just rock with those three for right now.
Okay.
To me, we need Jalen to be healthy. And
Washington
we need
or Withers?
Washington. Well, we need both of them to be healthy, but we need Jalen Washignton specifically to be healthy. Sorry, I forgot about that.
I know we got 2 Jalen W's now. That's fun.
Yeah.
I hadn't put that together till literally right now. That's cool.
So, Jalen, Coach Davis described him as the best big man shooter he's been around.
That's right.
We need that to be true. I mean, if that's really the case, then and he can put up Brady Manek numbers, we need him to prove that. We need him to show that. And if he does that, then that's going to be huge for us. And obviously, I don't think that we can say he won't or he will right now. We just haven't seen him enough. This is his first healthy offseason in 2 or 3 years.
That's right.
So we know he's going to get better and he's going to improve. How much is the question?
Because that mid-range shot or that baseline shot looked great last year, but he's yet to make a three-pointer in college. He's only taken 7, but we got to see it. It's got to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to see that. And I'm just be honest with you. I'm not familiar enough with Jalen Withers' game to really just get in here and dissect it and tell you what needs to happen with him. But I can tell you we need him to hit shots. We need that. And I know he'll play. He's a little bit of a hybrid as far as he could play the 3 and he could play the 4. But regardless, if he's a 3 or the 4, we need him to hit shots.
Yeah.
And Zayden actually, I'm pretty high on him. I think maybe he's flying a little under the radar.
I think so.
But here's the thing about Zayden that I've watched and kind of learned from examining his game. He impacts it in a lot of ways. He can shoot a little bit. He can do a little bit of everything. He's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. But the thing that sticks out to me the most about him is he's a winner. He's a winner. And he makes some like under the radar big time plays. That I think we somewhat lack. At least we lacked this past season. And I think that he can really help us in that regard. So all 3 bring something to the table that can be beneficial, but we have to have them bring it consistently in order to consistently free up Bacot and for us to be, as good as I think we can potentially be.
And I think part of that is getting a trustworthy and offensively capable wing who will be the starter at the 3. Because what that does is it allows Jalen Withers, it allows Zayden to really camp out at the 4 and learn that position solely and solidly. Not that they wouldn't or won't play at the 3, but if you got somebody like Harrison Ingram coming in as your 3, I mean, that's firm, and you can count on him for probably 32 to 35 minutes a game. You know what I mean? And then that allows the guys that are playing the 4 position to really just dial in and hone in on that. And I think each position that you fill allows the others to do what they need to do in their role more specifically. And so I haven't really thought about that till this conversation. So there is that. And so Pack with Mondo, how do we get Mondo back to having I think it feels to me like he just had a really big drop off this year, but the numbers don't tell that story. I think a lot of it is because he just didn't have, due to the injuries and stuff, he didn't have his same level of explosion or explosiveness. And I think that's the cause. But when you look at the averages and stuff, yeah, he was down 3 rebounds a game. He was down, less than a point a game from the year before. But is it simply a matter, do you think, as you were talking about earlier, you just can't have a scenario where guys can slump off of whoever's playing the 3 and whoever's playing the 4? Is it simply a matter of just getting a true stretch 4 who has to be honored out to the 3-point line, and that gives Mondo the space he needs?
No, not quite. I think that makes a huge difference. I'll tell you what I think will make a really big difference is if we value our possessions more consistently. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about turnovers. I'm talking more like shot selection.
Oh, interesting.
And role identity. I don't know what the numbers are, but I think a big reason why it feels like Armando Bacot had a drop-off, at least in my mind, is because it felt like he didn't get as many touches this year. Or maybe wasn't as much of a priority as it was for Caleb Love to get shots up.
I was just going to say, at least one of the reasons for that, with all due respect to Caleb, one of the main reasons for that is now no longer on this roster.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm just being truthful with that.
Yeah, 100%. And same as you, no disrespect. It is what it is. And I think, you get a stretch 4, and then you start valuing possessions, and we start getting him touches, and we play through that. Those two things combined, to me, make a huge, huge difference in his success rate and our team's success rate.
Yeah. Well, friends, the front court, we had a phenomenal year 2 years ago, a good year, a decent year this year, but it just didn't live up to that. And here's to hoping that it will be back to that same standard next year. We'll have to see. Obviously, a lot of it's going to be who Carolina uses these Final Four scholarships on, and that's going to give us a much better idea of what we have going forward. Pack, great work as always, my friend. Great conversation. It's good to be able to unpack all of this and check it out. Folks, thanks for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen. Coming up tomorrow, I actually want to have a little bit of a conversation about Jarin Stevenson. Are we forgetting about him and the fact that he might reclassify? Could that be a thing? I'm going to have that conversation with us on tomorrow's show. For now, though, you can follow us on Twitter. Locked On Heels is the show. At Coach_K23 is Pack. I'm at Isaac Schade. We'd love for you to leave a review on the show over at Apple Music. Great. It's so helpful when you do things like that. You can email the show lockedontarheels@gmail.com. And please don't forget to subscribe, smash the like button, and leave comments on your thoughts on how the front court performed last year. Hey, Pack and I both want to thank you so much for hanging out with us on Wednesday. We want to remind you that it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be right back with you tomorrow. But until then, peace.